After the diagnosis, we took a little bit of time to make some decisions, and I had a mastectomy, and that was followed by chemo. And I'll never forget the day that Randy and I were sitting there. I'm putting on my makeup, getting ready to go consult with the doctor about when to start chemo. I'm watching airplanes fly into the Twin Towers. And that put it in perspective for me a little bit. I thought, you know, I at least have hope of a few more years, and there are people that have no hope at all. They have just lost their lives. And I'll never forget that day, getting ready to go over to West Clinic. I've got lovely notes here, but I don't follow them. I did chemo, and then after that, I went in and had reconstruction. My doctor had given me the pathology report from the cancer. It wasn't a great report, but it wasn't terrible. 2 lymph nodes were involved, and my cancer tested positive for something called HER2. It was HER2 positive. He said, this is not good. This means it's aggressive. This means it's fast growing. But he said, I think you've got just a 15% chance that the cancer will come back. So, you know, I felt pretty good about that. 2002 was a much better year than 2001 had been. In March of that year, on Jared, our son's birthday, his wife gave birth to Hunter, our first grandchild. And I can remember in the hospital room taking my wig off and putting it on newborn Hunter's head. I mean, you've just got to keep a sense of humor when you're going through this kind of thing, or you'd spend all the time crying. Then, 3 years later, on a Wednesday afternoon, I'm standing in the kitchen and the phone rings. Callie's sitting at the kitchen table. I answer the phone. It is Dr. Tower, my oncologist. When your doctor calls you, that's not a good thing. And he said, I need you to come in for a CAT scan. Your tumor markers are way up, and we need to see what's going on. And I can just remember leaning my head against the door frame and saying, oh no. Oh no. So I got in there later that week. The CAT scan showed lesions on my liver. And the PET scan that they did a few days later showed that the lesions were in fact cancer. And he said, the breast cancer has now spread to your liver. Well, when I hear cancer in the liver, I said to him, these were my exact words, I said, this is it, isn't it? And he said, well, I'm not going to lie to you. Cancer in the liver will never go away. But I hope that we can treat you as if it's a chronic illness, and we can buy you some time. He said, we have got people who are 2 and 3 years out from this diagnosis. And I'm thinking 2 or 3 years, that's pretty good. I can get the kids a little bit older. And I just kept telling him, they are 4 and 9. And I pleaded with God, they are 4 and 9 years old. You've got to give me some more time. And Dr. Tower said, well, we're going to do a fish test on your past cells. I don't know how I guess they store the pathology slides. And we're going to hope that it's HER2 positive. And I said, why? Because you said that was aggressive and fast growing. He said, since you've been here, you know, since your original diagnosis, there is a new drug called Herceptin. It's just now being used for metastatic breast cancer, but we're hopeful that it will help keep the cancer at bay. That was in 2004. I took Herceptin along with chemo until I was finished with chemo, and then I did Herceptin once every 3 weeks. I go to West Clinic, they put it in my port. It doesn't have any side effects other than my fingernails break off. And I am still getting Herceptin now. 6 years later, my breast cancer is completely in remission. Dr. Tower had made no bones about it. He said it will not be in remission. Now when I talk to him, I finally asked him one day, I said, well, what do you call me? He said, you are in complete remission. He's amazed. He calls it a miracle. And he said, I frequently discuss your case with other oncologists. Well, protocol was to quit taking Herceptin after a year. He and I were very nervous about doing that because at that point it had kept it at bay. He said, we'll keep doing it, but your insurance is getting ready to quit paying for this. And I said, well, let's just do it till it does. In the meantime, research showed that Herceptin was working with breast cancer that had spread to other parts of the body, and protocol changed. And you now take it as long as it works. So I'm still taking Herceptin. And that, to me, shows what we're doing tonight. There would never have been research for the Herceptin if it weren't for people like you. There would never have been research to find Herceptin if it weren't for people like Jane and Cindy and everybody else that has worked on this. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing that, because it has made a huge difference for me in my life and for my family's life. But, you know, that's not the end of the story. Life was great, life was good. Yeah, I had breast cancer, but you know, hey, I can live with breast cancer, it's not doing anything. And then 2010 came. And in 2010, we found out that my daddy, who was one of the strongest, most vibrant, smartest, healthiest men I knew, we found out he had bladder cancer. And this was going along with some things we couldn't explain about him losing use of his right hand and his legs. And then later that year, he was diagnosed with ALS. In August, on August 6th, Daddy died. But it wasn't from the ALS. Thankfully, it was something quick, maybe a blood clot, maybe a heart attack. But in the weeks following Daddy's death, I noticed I wasn't hungry and I was tired. But I thought, well, I mean, you just lost your dad. You're probably a little bit depressed. And then I get a phone call from Dr. Towers' nurse, and that's not good either. She said, Dr. Towers out of town. He wanted me to call you. Your liver enzymes are way up. We want you to come in and let's do a CAT scan. So I go in and we do a CAT scan. I'm thinking all along, this is breast cancer that's gone somewhere else. And he came in and he told us, he said, this looks like there's a small tumor near the pancreas, and you've got pancreatic cancer. And I just remember thinking, I don't know anybody who's gotten well after pancreatic cancer. You know, I mean, I was hoping it wouldn't be breast cancer, but that would have been good. Which brings me back to another point that I kind of skipped. I remember when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, people would say, if you've got cancer, that's the kind you want to have. And I'm thinking, that's stupid. I don't want to have cancer of any kind. I don't want to have breast cancer. I don't want to have any kind. But now I'm being faced with pancreatic cancer, and I'm thinking, I wish it was breast cancer. That was, you know, that was not a bad thought when they were saying that. So Dr. Tower told us, he said, we're fortunate that we have found this early. I feel like your best bet is a procedure called the Whipple. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the Whipple, but if you've known anybody that's had the Whipple, or if you know a doctor, they'll just shake their head and say, oh, that's a bad surgery.